The severance pay, as per the contract, is $71.71. And make sure to clean up before you disappear. At that moment, a murmur spread through the room. The words $71.71 and as per the contract struck a nerve. There's a history of tension between us. Going back 6 months, when rumors began swirling that Mr. Ingram would likely become the second president. At that time, a particular issue arose between us. My name is Tyson. I'm 59, approaching the milestone of turning 60. It's been nearly 40 years since I joined this company straight out of college at 22. As the years pass, time seems to move faster and faster. It feels like just yesterday when my eldest daughter was born. In reality, she'll be graduating from college and entering the workforce next year. I've never once thought of leaving this company. I owe a debt of gratitude to the former president, Mr. Underwood, who hired me. I've always been willing to go through fire and water for him. Mr. Underwood, even well into his senior years, continued to guide us from the front lines. However, around a decade ago, at 80 years old, signs of cognitive decline began to appear, and at 90, he finally decided to retire. He has 2 children, both daughters. His eldest married, had children, and devoted herself to her family. The youngest joined a company specializing in overseas business and currently serves as the head of their San Francisco branch. So, who would succeed him? As cherry blossoms faded and fresh greenery flourished, this topic filled the conversations around the office. I heard that the eldest daughter's son is the most likely candidate. While saying this, my subordinate Brian placed a stack of documents on my desk. I've finished preparing these. As always, Brian, you work fast. As I looked through the submitted documents, I listened to Brian's update. And it turns out that her son is about the same age as me. Brian is currently 30 years old. Since Mr. Underwood is 90, and his eldest daughter is approaching 60, it wouldn't be surprising if her son is around that age. Since the youngest daughter remains single and has no children, no one questioned the idea of the eldest son taking over. Everyone likely assumed things would be fine if he was Mr. Underwood's grandson. Good work, this document looks great, no corrections needed. It should be ready for the next step. Honestly, Brian, I think there's nothing left for me to teach you. I placed a hand on Brian's shoulder, and he looked at me with a hint of sadness in his eyes. While I'm glad to be trusted with work, it's hard to believe you'll soon be gone. You've helped me since I joined over 10 years now. It's pretty emotional. Scratching his cheek, Brian said that, and I responded with a soft, lowered eyebrow smile. I'm so flattered you'd say that. Or could it be, you'll miss me when I'm gone? What a sentimental guy. Jokingly, I teased him, and Brian laughed loudly. Come on, don't say that. It's not like I swing that way. The other employees who overheard chuckled, and the entire systems department was filled with warm laughter. Then, 6 months later. Tomorrow's my birthday. In other words, as of tomorrow, I'll be officially retiring from this company. When I was a kid, I figured 20 would come in no time. And even when my oldest daughter was born, I thought I still had over 20 years until 60. I don't know what it is. I want to send everyone off with a smile, but I feel so emotional. Just as Brian was about to tear up, someone stepped in to interrupt him. What's wrong with you? Are you really that sad to see an old guy like him leave? How sentimental. Mr. Ingram. The man had burst into the systems office and greeted everyone with his usual bluntness. This was Mr. Ingram. He's Mr. Underwood's grandson, someone Brian used to talk about often. That said, he's now succeeded Mr. Underwood and become the second-generation president. So instead of being called grandson, he's now referred to as Mr. Ingram. From the moment he walked into the office, the atmosphere grew heavy. But he paid it no mind and laughed loudly, unfazed. Thanks for working like a horse until 60. You did pretty well for an old guy. But honestly, Having elderly folks like you hanging around here is pointless. It's a lot more efficient if society runs with people under 40. I could see where he was coming from. The younger ones do adapt faster to new information, and they're more flexible than we are. Still, it was a harsh comment for employees who'd given so much to the company over the years. In fact, the faces of employees over 40 were visibly tense. Meanwhile, those under 40 showed signs of confusion, unsure of how to react. Agreeing outright wouldn't feel right, but staying silent could upset Mr. Ingram. That's when Brian, quick on his feet, spoke up. "Come on, Mr. Ingram, don't say that. When we were newbies, we learned so much from our seniors. We're grateful for that. But I also heard about our younger team scoring a big deal recently. Isn't it all about coexistence these days?" Is that so?" Mr. Ingram looked unimpressed. Being told that by someone like Brian, his peer incapable, must have hit a nerve. But Brian had one weakness. And Mr. Ingram knew just where to poke. "Still, you're a high school grad, right?" High school grads, well. People try to prop them up with terms like natural smarts or streetwise, but it's all just pity points. "So you saying that doesn't mean much." "Haha, yeah, you're absolutely right." Brian laughed along, though the hurt showed a bit on his face. Another employee quickly changed the subject, unable to watch any longer. In the midst of the conversation, Mr. Ingram suddenly remembered something and walked over to me with a broad smile. Then he held out a thin brown envelope. "Oh right, I almost forgot. The reason I came here was to congratulate you on your retirement tomorrow. Plus, I brought the agreed amount." With that, he tossed a brown envelope labeled severance pay in sloppy handwriting, likely filled with loose change, onto my desk. The coins clinked together with a light, mocking sound. The other employees, unaware of the circumstances, watched with puzzled expressions. As I frowned, Mr. Ingram looked thoroughly pleased with himself. The severance pay, as per the contract, is $71.71. "And make sure to clean up before you disappear." At that moment, a murmur spread through the room. The words he uttered, $71.71, and "as per the contract." There's a deep rift between us. Half a year ago, around the time there was talk of Mr. Ingram possibly stepping in as the second-generation president. Back then, a certain issue had arisen between us. Back in late May, the company sent out a notice about the incoming president. Soon after, I was summoned to the president's office. It was none other than Mr. Ingram himself. We had no prior connection, and I hadn't done anything to merit this, so I went, puzzled. After knocking and hearing his response, I walked in, only to be met with an unexpected sight. "Oh, you made it." There was the new president, Mr. Ingram, showing not a hint of a welcoming vibe. When Mr. Underwood was in charge, this office only had the bare essentials, but now it's more like the owner's personal hobby room. The shelves that once held trophies and photos are now lined with anime figurines, and where there were once potted plants, there's now a golf bag. On the president's desk sat a randomly placed Gundam model, and instead of the pleasant aroma of the black coffee Mr. Underwood used to drink, the heavy, greasy smell of snack foods now lingered in the air. I don't mean to criticize, but there's an undeniable sadness in seeing the office bear no trace of the man I once looked up to. And there sat the current occupant, Mr. Ingram, reclining in his chair, tapping his index finger rhythmically on the desk. He stared intently at me, then, without breaking eye contact, spoke firmly. "You're an old guy who just doesn't fit our company culture or vision. Do you get it? I'm saying I want you gone." For a moment, I couldn't process what he was saying. I can't believe Mr. Underwood would have left without any handover. In fact, as he got older, he had a highly capable secretary managing everything for him, keeping the company running smoothly. So, the fact that I'll be retiring soon. That's right, that secretary. Normally, she would be here, standing beside Mr. Underwood, as she always did, and she's 4 years younger than I am. Where could she be? With that thought, I decided to ask about her. Before I respond to that, may I ask one question? Ha? What is it? Make it quick. The president's secretary, where is she now? Mr. Ingram responded with a casual yeah, as if it was of no importance. I fired her. Just having an older woman around puts me in a terrible mood. Normally, you'd expect a young one as the president's secretary, right? Eventually, I'll assign one of the cute girls from sales or admin to be my secretary. I was stunned, speechless. Does he even know what it means to be a secretary? Indeed, since they are often with the president, a certain level of appearance is expected. Even so, without the skills to match, it means nothing. A presidential secretary isn't a fashion model or a company mascot, their role is to support the president behind the scenes. Yet this man doesn't care as long as the secretary's appearance suits him. The secretary who had supported Mr. Underwood was renowned for her competence, and yet he discarded her without a second thought. Just as I was standing there in shock, he brought the conversation back on track. The reason I told you and that old lady you're being fired is simple: you're in the way. From here on out, this company will be built around us young people. We don't need the older generation. Looking at his cold, indifferent face, I realized there was no point in trying to reason with him. Besides, with her abilities, that secretary will undoubtedly have companies lining up to hire her. So, I decided to let it go. Noticing my look of dissatisfaction, Mr. Ingram lightly patted his fist against his palm and continued. If you're so unhappy, let's make a contract. You're set to retire on your birthday, right? Then, I'll give you this as a retirement bonus. He opened his wallet and tossed a few $10 bills and coins onto the desk. Ah, turns out this is all I've got on me, $71.71. Consider yourself lucky, you're getting the president's entire fortune. So, no complaints. Just retire. And in the meantime, properly hand over your work to the young ones with a bright future ahead, and don't make any fuss. They say you should leave without disturbing the waters, right? That's what I'm asking. It was a flimsy excuse, but looking at his attitude, I had no energy left to argue and decided to accept it. But somehow, rumors spread in an odd direction. Before I knew it, people were calling me the senior who gets to retire with the president's full fortune. Of course, none of the subordinates would dare to call me by such a dishonorable nickname. It's mostly Mr. Ingram's loyalists who refer to me that way. Things I never encountered before started cropping up one after another. Whenever I passed unfamiliar employees in the hallway, they'd pointedly say things like, "Good riddance, huh?" or "Well, what do you expect from an old guy?" Naturally, I had no interest in engaging in petty disputes. Even without being told by Mr. Ingram, I'm retiring soon, so I'll just quietly watch over my juniors and subordinates from the sidelines. I believe that sometimes, those in leadership need to step back and observe their team from a distance. With retirement just around the corner, their words don't really affect me. Yet, the treatment I've received clearly frustrates Brian, who grumbles, visibly annoyed. The new hires and those aligned with Mr. Ingram have no idea how amazing you are, Tyson. They talk like they know something, but they don't. Seriously, is Mr. Ingram really Mr. Underwood's grandson? Calming Brian down, I continued preparing for a smooth transition for my retirement 6 months from now. Don't worry so much. They're the type who can't speak up unless they're in a group. Besides, my subordinates and juniors have my back. I couldn't care less what the newbies say. Well, maybe so, but as your subordinate, I just can't accept it. If a newcomer had shown such disrespect to a boss I admired, I'd have probably reacted the same way as Brian. And being in this position now, having a younger colleague stand up for me felt surprisingly good. Those supportive words had a far stronger impact than the baseless accusations I'd been hearing. I felt genuinely grateful for having such good people around me. But since Brian was too worked up to focus on work, I changed the subject. This weekend, my wife and daughter are going on a little hot springs trip. Just the two of them. So, I'll be home on pet duty. Hey, Brian. Recommend me a place with some good drinks again, will you? Puffing his chest out proudly, he replied. Absolutely. Funny enough, my wife's away too, she's going to a concert. I'll keep you company. Despite our age difference, nearly like father and son, we shared an easy, friendly relationship. It was a bond that went beyond the usual boss-subordinate dynamic. No matter what Mr. Ingram or his followers said, having colleagues like Brian close by made it all easier to brush off. Yet, Mr. Ingram never let that deter him. He kept poking his nose into my business, finding ways to interfere. Accusing us of overspending or saying the team was too soft. It was all based on his own biases, clearly because he didn't like me and thus tried to paint the whole systems department in a bad light. What's the deal with this setup? And here, why's this deadline so generous? Labor costs are rising, tighten it up. That's not possible. When I firmly declared that, Mr. Ingram openly frowned and crossed his arms. Not possible doesn't cut it. Do it. I'm the president, and what I say goes. What kind of dictatorship is this, I wonder? Even so, I maintain my unyielding stance. In truth, the other department heads, sales, administration, development, had all caved under Mr. Ingram's pressure and followed his every instruction. They simply passed the orders down to their subordinates. As a result, employees were burning out, struggling to meet the increased workloads and quality standards. It seems the administration, under Mr. Ingram's influence, is an exception, but he's probably just found a favorite among the female staff. But I wasn't about to comply. It's impossible. I've been doing things this way for nearly 40 years without issues. Piling on more only adds to my team's burden. They're human beings, forcing extra work on them is out of the question. I won't do it. As I stared him down, he clicked his tongue in frustration and stormed off. One day, after many days like this, Mr. Ingram stopped me in the hallway. After you're gone, I'll be doing some reorganization. We need fresh blood, so I don't want a single trace of you left behind. Wouldn't want your successor burdened by your legacy, right? So, sign here. He pulled out a document from his bag, shoving it in my hands. It was a document stating that if I left even a single trace behind, they would file a claim for damages. Of course, it was legally meaningless, but arguing would get me nowhere. With a sigh, I signed the paper. Watching me, Mr. Ingram barely bothered to check it before tucking the document away. Satisfied, he walked off with a smug look on his face. Soon after, Brian caught up to me, a puzzled expression on his face. Hey, did Mr. Ingram seem unusually cheerful just now? I don't know, it feels like the calm before the storm. Do you know what's going on? If I told him I'd been pressured into signing such an absurdly one-sided paper, he'd make a scene. So, I brushed it off. And just like that, 6 months passed. I managed to hold my ground, clashing with Mr. Ingram right up until the day before my retirement. He seemed bent on pestering me to the very end. That bit about the severance pay of just over $70 is honestly the least of my concerns. He didn't need to come all the way here to say it, but it's clear he wanted to humiliate me one last time. As I glared at the brown envelope from earlier, Mr. Ingram spoke up, deliberately mocking. What's the matter? Were you really that happy? Well, for someone like you, I suppose $70 must feel like a fortune. Consider the loose change a bonus. Now take it and leave, your place is at home, not here. I noticed Brian clenching his fists in anger. Other employees, who'd initially looked confused, now displayed expressions of mounting outrage. Seeing their reactions, I thought to myself, no matter how tyrannical Mr. Ingram was, no matter how much his followers belittled me, the reputation I'd built over the years wasn't for nothing. Rebellion against Mr. Ingram had been simmering in our department, but this was the final straw. A storm of protest erupted. "Excuse me, but this is too much. You've only been here 6 months, yet you talk as if you know everything. You have no idea what Tyson has been through and accomplished." Brian's words sliced through the silence. With his lead, other employees began speaking up in my defense, directing their support toward Mr. Ingram. I never thought I'd have such an amazing boss. Despite my high school education, he treated me no differently from my college-educated peers, teaching me the ropes and showing equal respect to everyone. That's who Tyson is. In the systems department. Unless it's due to unavoidable reasons like pregnancy, caregiving, or relocation, hardly anyone quits. Doesn't that say something about Tyson's character? Everyone nodded in agreement with Brian's heartfelt plea. But Mr. Ingram stopped them all with a raised palm. "If you want to oppose me, then I'll fire you all. It's no problem finding tech staff for the systems department, and I won't miss any of you. This is my domain, so if you can't follow my rules, then leave." As someone already retiring soon, I wasn't concerned. But the others were in a different situation. People like Brian, supporting families, or single parents juggling childcare and elderly care, they were all at risk. "Mr. Ingram, that's too harsh. You can blame me if you want, but please don't involve my team." Mr. Ingram immediately seized on my words, twisting them. "Oh? And who's going to stop me from doing what I want as president? Can't you understand something as simple as resigning if you have complaints?" Honestly, I always suspected the systems department was full of deadweight. I hadn't heard any such rumors, but it was likely the other department heads, unhappy with my defiance, who told Mr. Ingram just that. My mind, which had remained unshaken despite everything, began to ripple like a stone dropped in a calm pond. My once serene thoughts stirred within me. Very well. Then, I'll follow the terms of the contract we made. I erased a certain system I had developed right in front of him. What? That? The entire staff, knowing what I had done, gasped in horror. Meanwhile, Mr. Ingram, clueless about what had just occurred, only scowled in confusion. But as he realized the gravity of what I had deleted, his expression changed. "Tyson. That was a crucial system. How are we supposed to work without it? Without that, every department, the entire company, will come to a halt." He yelled furiously, his face red with anger. "Tyson, what have you done? If there's any damage, I'll demand compensation from you." Did he not realize his contradiction? I reminded him of the agreement we had signed in the hallway that day. "You signed a contract, didn't you? It stated that if I didn't erase all traces of my presence, I'd be liable for damages. This situation doesn't match up with your own terms or the contract." Contract. Explaining the situation to the bewildered employees left them all speechless. Then, keeping my composure, I continued. "Well, I'll be clocking out. Tomorrow's my last day, which is just for farewells anyway, so I won't be doing any work. I'll be officially resigning then." Ignoring Mr. Ingram's attempts to call me back, I left the company. The next day, a tense atmosphere filled the systems department as Mr. Ingram showed up, looking bruised and battered. I was as surprised as anyone and asked what happened, only to hear that he had finally understood the gravity of his actions after realizing the system I deleted was patented. He'd hit the bottle hard out of despair. Patented? No way. So now we're stuck if he doesn't approve it, but he deleted it? I mean, sure, I told him to erase everything. But who would have expected it was patented? Listening to his muttering, Brian explained with a shrug. On his way home, he got caught in sudden rain, slipped, and fell into an outdoor garbage bin outside a restaurant. He stormed into the place in anger, only to slip again and hit his face on a nearby table. Hearing Brian's account, I muttered to myself, talk about adding insult to injury. As Mr. Ingram sniffled, tears streaming down his face, I spoke up. "Crying won't help you now. You created this mess, and as for your injuries, you brought those on yourself. Whether from shame or exhaustion, Mr. Ingram sat slumped, muttering incoherently. Then suddenly, he started pulling at his hair and shouted, "Why is it always like this? No matter how hard I try, nothing ever goes right. I was given this position from my grandfather, as his only grandson. But now, damn it all." He seemed lost in frustration, and everyone around him was at a loss for words. I decided to be direct with him. "Didn't I tell you crying won't solve anything?" Startled by the volume of my voice, Mr. Ingram flinched, his shoulders jerking as he turned to face me with tearful eyes. "You're only 30. To the world, that's still young and inexperienced. Your grandfather likely hoped you'd carry on his legacy. But somewhere along the way, you lost your direction. Now, you've wandered so far you can't find your way back. While nurturing young talent is vital, it's equally important to respect those who've laid the groundwork. Isn't that right?" Mr. Ingram nodded weakly, then broke down, sobbing openly. "What do we do now?" Brian asked, still visibly exasperated. I let out a small sigh and said to Mr. Ingram, "You still have room to grow. If you're going to turn back, now is the time. If you push any further, you'll lose everyone's support. But if you show the right attitude, I'll restore the data from the backup." At this, Mr. Ingram slowly stood and bowed deeply to me. "Yes, you're absolutely right. It seems I took a wrong path somewhere. I sensed it but got caught up in having everyone listen to me. I'm truly sorry." Accepting his apology, I shrugged, sat down at my computer, and restored the data. "I'll be expecting great things from you, Mr. Ingram." He didn't respond to my words. Instead, he stood there trembling, his head bowed low. After that, as planned, I made my rounds to say my goodbyes and left the company I dedicated so many years to. The female employees gifted me a large bouquet and several cards filled with personal messages, secretly written and passed around. I hadn't expected such warm messages from people outside of the systems department. Mr. Ingram once mentioned making this a youth-centered company, and I don't necessarily disagree with that idea. But then, Brian continued, "It's undeniable that our predecessors laid the foundation here. Without them, we wouldn't have a place to work today. There's tension now between the younger generation and the older employees, but I think it's essential to break down that barrier. If we respect one another, we can avoid unnecessary conflict." It was a reasonable point. Of course, we, the older generation, must update our mindsets and ways of working to understand younger generations better. At the same time, it's crucial for younger employees to respect those who built the world they're part of and not push only for their own agenda. Hostility leads nowhere. Having experienced that in my youth, I try to teach the young ones proper manners and perspectives in the workplace, all while respecting their views. Naturally, as a senior employee, I sometimes took on the role of the bad guy. But by doing so, I hope to create an environment where future generations could work comfortably and develop their own critical thinking skills. I believe that's what it truly means to be seasoned by society. Thank you for everything." I bent low in a deep bow. Though I may have taught my younger colleagues about work and manners, they also taught me many valuable lessons. Lauren, thank you for your insightful advice on handling my teenage daughter. Kevin, thanks for always gathering and sharing the latest systems info with everyone. Nora, thank you for taking on the small tasks, even when I didn't ask. Calling each person by name and expressing my gratitude, I could see their eyes glistening with emotion. Then, I called that one name. Brian. "Yes." He responded, voice cracking in nervousness, something I wasn't used to from him. Seeing his reaction, I couldn't help but laugh. "Thank you for introducing me to good drinks." "Yes, wait, drinks? That's it? Ha ha. It's a compliment. Plus, I appreciate you always joining this old man for a drink whenever I asked. I'm also grateful to your wife for her understanding." To me, you were more than just a colleague." With that, his face turned bright red. "Hey now, don't go blushing from an old man's words," I joked, filling the office with warm laughter. Leaving with the bouquet and farewells, I walked out of the building and noticed Mr. Ingram standing out front. Beside him was an elderly man in a wheelchair. Mr. Underwood. There was no mistaking him. It was Mr. Underwood, who had stepped down due to declining health and cognitive ability, keeping him from any non-family interactions until now. "I just got a call from the hospital," Mr. Ingram explained. "My grandfather insisted on going out today. The nurse said he kept saying, 'Today's important.' The only special thing today is your last day, Tyson, so I asked him, and he told me to hurry and bring him here." As Mr. Ingram finished speaking, Mr. Underwood motioned for me to come closer. His voice was faint, trembling and raspy, barely audible. Yet somehow, I understood what he meant. "Mr. Underwood, I'm the one who's grateful. Thank you for remembering my birthday." Hearing that, he gave me a joyful smile. A few days later, I received the news that Mr. Underwood had passed. However, I didn't feel much sadness. At the funeral, his face appeared peaceful, almost as if he were smiling. "Thank you for not abandoning me, even after all I've put you through. I promise to cherish the company my grandfather built once more. Thanks to your influence, none of the employees have left. Truly, thank you so much." As Mr. Ingram bowed deeply, I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Knowing you've changed gives me reassurance. I was beginning to wonder how I could help your team if you continued down that path. But now that worry has turned out to be unfounded in the best way possible. I look forward to seeing what you'll achieve." Hearing my words, Mr. Ingram looked back at me with a refreshed expression. He replied that he would strive to become a president as remarkable as his grandfather. How did it go again? As I hesitated in response to Emily's question, she spoke up. "Your grandmother will surely get better if you keep smiling." My eyes widened. "I think I might have said something like that." Emily smiled faintly. Then she started rummaging through her bag. "Didn't you give this to that kid?" When I saw what Emily was holding, I was truly shocked. "My name is Kevin, 30 years old. Starting today, I'm working as a nurse at this small clinic in a rural town. The doctor is in his 60s, and the nurse in her 50s, and they've been working together here for years. But as it got harder for them physically, they requested a nurse to be sent in to help. And that's how I ended up here." Both of them were so happy I came that they immediately left together for a house call. Everyone in this town knows the doctor's house call hours, and they figured that if someone young like me was here to watch the place, they'd have no worries, even if there was an emergency. Honestly, I was a bit overwhelmed. Though I had received some instructions in the morning, I still didn't know where anything was, which made being left in charge nerve-wracking. I decided to start familiarizing myself with the place by checking all the shelves and taking notes. They told me that no one usually comes during the doctor's house call hours unless it's an emergency, but... "Excuse me. Please help, we have an emergency." Emergencies always happen when you least want them to, don't they? When I headed to the entrance, a young woman was holding a small boy, panting for breath. I'm sorry. Dr. Watson is out on a house call right now." Before I could finish, the woman shouted, "I know that. But look at him, he's in so much pain. Please, do something. You're in uniform, so you're in the medical field too, right?" Her loud, desperate words made me a bit flustered. "Okay, please, come this way." I led the boy to a chair in the examination room. Looking at him, I saw that he'd suffered a large injury to his knee. He fell on the way back from school. Please help him quickly. Hearing the urgency in her voice only made me more anxious. Even though I had just checked where the bandages were, I couldn't recall their location. What are you doing? Hurry! The woman was on the verge of tears. She was probably finding it unbearable to watch the boy moaning in pain. The more urgent her voice became, the more I panicked. I'm sorry, could you please wait in the waiting room for a moment? The woman looked confused. It's just that your anxiety might rub off on him. I'm sorry. Reluctantly, she stepped out after reassuring the boy. It's going to be okay. It might hurt a little, but be brave, okay? After she left, I managed to regain some composure and washed the boy's wound with water. I carefully checked for any sand or dirt in the cut. The boy grimaced in pain but stayed strong. Good job. Now I'm going to remove the little stones, okay? I explained everything to him as I carefully used tweezers to remove the gravel and sand without causing more pain. While I was doing this, Dr. Watson returned. I could hear his voice from the waiting room as he spoke with the woman. It seemed she had calmed down a bit. After finishing the wound cleaning, I handed the boy over to Dr. Watson and headed to the waiting room to update the woman. I've removed the stones and sand from his wound. Dr. Watson will take care of the rest. When I said that, the woman bowed her head. I'm sorry. I lost my composure. Thank you for your help. Please take care of him. Although her words were polite, it was clear she didn't trust me. She probably thinks I'm an incompetent nurse. On my very first day, I found myself feeling a little down. Natalie, one of the nurses, told me more about the woman. Her name was Emily. Apparently, she had started teaching at the local elementary school just last year. She's bright, energetic, and gives everything her all. At 24 years old, she's still young, but she's already a popular teacher. She gives too much sometimes though. Because of the way she pressured me on my first day, my initial impression of her wasn't great. I found myself hoping that she and those around her would stay healthy. I didn't want to see her too often at the clinic because of illness or injury. I guess that's how uneasy I felt around her at first. But then, a month passed. I encountered her many times. Sometimes she would knock on the door before the clinic even opened, carrying an elderly person who had fallen ill on the street. Other times, while I was heading home after work, she'd be crawling on the ground looking for something someone had dropped. She seems to be the type who just can't leave people in trouble. And just like Natalie said, she was always giving it her all. Because of that, she sometimes got a bit too intense. When she brought in the elderly person, she begged. They said he's anemic. Please, hurry, do something. And when she was looking for the lost item, she dragged me in by saying, "Oh, Kevin. Perfect timing. Help me look for it." That day, I had planned to go home early and watch a TV show I was looking forward to, but I couldn't turn her down and ended up helping. I'm also not the type to leave people in need. I still vividly remember the sense of relief when we found the lost item. And the sight of Emily's radiant smile, as if she was celebrating her own success, has stayed in my mind ever since. Though my first impression of her wasn't the best, I couldn't stop thinking about that smile. I tried not to dwell on it too much. Then, one day during these routine encounters, Dr. Watson asked me to deliver some medicine to a patient, so I was walking through the town. It wasn't far, but driving there would have required navigating some narrow roads, so I decided to go on foot. It was a sunny break during the rainy season, and the air was a bit humid. As I walked, I started feeling a bit flushed. Just then, I heard a loud shout, which startled me. Looking toward the sound, I saw the local elementary school ahead. The elementary school, huh? I wonder if Emily's there. With that thought in mind, I glanced over at the school grounds, where I saw the children line up. As I kept walking, I realized it was some sort of group activity class. The PE teacher was loudly giving instructions. There were kids of all sizes, so it seemed like a whole school practice. This town doesn't have many children. I'd heard each grade only has a few students. As I kept watching, I spotted Emily standing there, rigid in her tracksuit. She looked incredibly tense. PE teachers, they always have such loud voices, and some of them can be pretty intimidating. At first, I was just thinking casually, but then, a strange sense of unease crept in, and I stopped in my tracks. The PE teacher's voice was getting more and more frustrated, probably because the children weren't moving in sync. Then, in the next moment, I pushed off the ground and started running. At the same time, I heard a scream. As the crowd started to stir, I arrived at the school grounds. And then, one by one, the children began collapsing. I shouted at the top of my lungs, "It's heat stroke! Move the kids into the shade! Anyone who can, give them water! Fan them with anything you've got!" At my words, Emily muttered hesitantly, "But should we really move them? Shouldn't we wait for Dr. Watson to arrive?" I shouted back, cooling their bodies down is the priority. "I'm a nurse. Trust me." Emily's immediate reply, "Yes," echoed, and the other teachers also sprang into action. I quickly called the clinic to have Dr. Watson bring any necessary supplies and asked them to rush over. Just in case, I also arranged for an ambulance. Meanwhile, the staff brought thermometers, ice pillows, and water from the infirmary. I went around checking the children, prioritizing the ones who needed help the most. I checked if they could say their names or drink water. For those who were half-conscious or whose hands were shaking too much to drink, I left notes with symbols on them to indicate their condition. Seeing that the teachers, including Emily, were flustered, I gave them instructions. Kids without a note are in relatively better condition. Cool their armpits and necks, and have them drink water slowly. The teachers, now a little calmer, quickly followed my instructions. Emily, too, was trying her best, encouraging the children, "Hang in there. It's going to be okay." At that moment, Dr. Watson arrived in a hurry. "Dr. Watson, I've marked the kids in the order of urgency." Just from that, Dr. Watson understood what I meant. He rushed to the side of a child with trembling hands and began giving precise instructions after assessing the situation. He directed that the child be moved indoors for IV treatment. Dr. Watson took care of the children with the highest priority. Feeling a bit more at ease, I began checking on the kids who could drink water. As I slowly gave them the oral rehydration solution that Natalie had brought, their symptoms gradually started to improve. Thankfully, none of the kids needed to be taken by ambulance. The paramedics explained that my quick response had made all the difference. The PE teacher, however, seemed confused by the unexpected situation. "It's only June, and all the adults were fine," he muttered in disbelief, which left me a bit frustrated. In this season, the body isn't yet accustomed to the heat. More people rely on air conditioning, which weakens the body's ability to sweat. And today, because of yesterday's rain, the humidity was high, making it harder for the body to cool down. Kids, being shorter, are more affected by heat radiating from the ground. Outdoor activities without proper breaks are out of the question. My slightly firm tone made the PE teacher clear his throat awkwardly. All the other teachers were listening to me as well. Dr. Watson nodded in agreement, which seemed to add weight to my explanation. As we left the scene, I hoped they would be more careful in the future and avoid pushing the children too hard. After my shift finally ended, I began my tired walk home. Then I heard a voice from behind, and I turned around. Emily was standing there. "Hi there. Are you on your way home?" I greeted her casually, and she bowed to me. Thank you so much for today." I smiled back at her. "It's my job. I'm just glad everyone's okay." "You, too, it must have been tough for you, right?" When I pointed this out, Emily looked surprised. "Actually, when I passed by the school earlier, I noticed you seemed troubled." I had a bad feeling. Even though she's usually so cheerful, she seemed drained. It looked like she was trying to hold something back. And then the children collapsed before she did. The kids had reached their limit first. You could tell from my expression. "That's impressive. Would you like to grab a bite to eat, if you're free?" To be honest, I was exhausted. I really just wanted to go home. But this was an invitation from a woman I had started to feel a little intrigued by. I couldn't turn her down. We walked into a small restaurant nearby. There were other places if we kept walking, but we both agreed we didn't feel like walking anymore. Since it was still early, there weren't any other customers, and we were seated in a private booth in the back. Looking at the menu, I saw they didn't just have typical diner food but also some meal options, so I ordered the meatloaf plate. "When you're tired, comfort food like this really hits the spot," I said while eating. Emily looked at me, wide-eyed. "Really?" I should have ordered the meatloaf too. There was something about the way she listened to me so earnestly that made her seem a little cute. "You were like a completely different person today, Kevin." I gave a small, sheepish smile. "Does that mean you want to say that my usual self isn't great?" I asked, half joking, and she tilted her head thoughtfully. My first impression was, "You seemed a bit unreliable, maybe," she admitted. Her words made me slump a little. That day, it was my first day on the job. I didn't know where anything was, Dr. Watson wasn't there, and you were rushing me. I was seriously panicking. I explained, making my case, and Emily shrugged apologetically. "I'm sorry. That boy's injury looked so painful, and I panicked too." She had run to the clinic with the boy in her arms, only to find me, the nurse, flustered. It wasn't surprising she found me unreliable. But my first impression of her wasn't that great either, so I guess we were even. But recently, I've started to think you're actually really kind. You helped me look for that lost item, and today, my impression of you completely changed. You handled everything so efficiently, giving us clear instructions and prioritizing the kids. And you even told off that scary Mr. Thompson. "Kevin, who are you?" I chuckled softly. "I'm just a regular nurse. Though, if there's something that sets me apart, I do have experience as a disaster relief nurse." Emily's eyes widened again. "Disaster relief?" I nodded. "Yeah. I've always wanted to be involved in emergency medicine, so while I was working at a large hospital, I expressed my desire to become a disaster relief nurse. I wanted to save as many lives as possible. That desire is what led me to become a nurse. To save even more lives, I became interested in emergency care. And the sight of disaster relief nurses working in disaster areas had inspired me deeply. After graduating from university, I worked at a DMAT designated hospital. For 5 years, I worked relentlessly. The hospital recognized my efforts and selected me. I underwent the necessary training and exams, and was eventually deployed to a disaster area as a relief nurse. It was the field I had admired for so long, but it was incredibly tough. Every second counted, and my decisions could mean the difference between life and death. The tension and sense of responsibility were overwhelming. There was no time to comfort the anxious survivors. I was constantly forced to make difficult choices. But back then, I wanted to protect everyone, and I got scolded a lot for it. Emily softly murmured, "What did they scold you for?" I groaned a little, thinking, well, for example, scrapes and cuts are low priority medically, but they still hurt, right? I knew they should be dealt with later. But I'd hand out band-aids, or I'd comfort a little girl who looked like she was about to cry because her relative was in bad shape. Emily leaned in, clearly interested. "What did you say to her?" I furrowed my brow, trying to remember. How did it go again? As I hesitated, Emily spoke up. "You told her, your grandmother will surely get better if you keep smiling." My eyes widened in surprise. I think I might have said something like that. Emily smiled faintly. Then she reached into her bag and pulled something out. "Didn't you give this to that girl?" In her hand was a small paper crane, carefully folded from washi paper. "What? How?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "The girl you spoke to, that was me. My parents were missing, and it was just my grandmother and me, both of us shaking in the cold. My grandmother's health had taken a turn, and I asked for help, but her condition wasn't severe enough to warrant immediate attention. All they told me was to keep her warm." I felt so lost, and that's when you spoke to me. A memory of a trembling, desperate little girl flashed in my mind. "No way, it can't be." Emily gazed lovingly at the crane in her hand. That paper crane was the one my grandmother had folded for me when I was deployed as a disaster relief nurse. She had entrusted it to me, wishing for my safety, but I felt that the little girl needed it more than I did, so I gave it to her. "I saw you getting scolded after you talked to me too." I scratched my head, feeling a bit awkward. If I prioritized things wrong, lives that could have been saved would be lost. That's what I was taught, and from that point on, I focused solely on the lives right in front of me. As a disaster relief nurse, you might think you didn't do well, but to me, you were an unforgettable hero. Even though I didn't realize it until now," Emily said with teary eyes, offering a small smile. "It's not surprising you didn't recognize me. It was only for a moment, and I was wearing a mask the whole time." Emily gave me a deep bow. "You were the one who comforted me in such a dark time, and I treated you so poorly at the clinic." "I'm so sorry." I couldn't help but laugh. "I think you're apologizing for the wrong thing." As I made a light-hearted joke, Emily laughed too. "Because, back then, you really did seem unreliable." "I'm really sorry." As Emily apologized like a child making excuses, I found her utterly adorable. From that moment on, we quickly grew closer. The day we talked at the restaurant, we exchanged personal contact information. Every time I pass by the elementary school, I feel a little flutter of excitement. I find myself looking around, wondering if she might be there. Even though I knew she was too focused on her work to text during the day, I couldn't help but check my phone constantly. I had completely fallen for her. Wanting to see her, I worked up the courage to ask her out for a meal. I nervously waited for her reply, and when it came, it was a yes. I thought it might be the perfect opportunity to confess my feelings, but then, it's been so hot lately, hasn't it? Oh, hey, how about we go to the river sometime? Maybe next week, she suggested. And my excitement deflated immediately. I can't swim. I didn't want to admit something so uncool, but it was the truth. Really? That's surprising. I scratched my head again, feeling a bit embarrassed. Yeah, so maybe we could do something else. Before I could finish, Emily leaned in eagerly. I'll teach you. I was stunned. What? I never expected her to respond like that. Completely unaware of my awkwardness, Emily's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. I'm a really good teacher. I took swimming lessons for years. There's this great spot upstream from here where you can swim, the water's super cold and refreshing. It's settled then. And just like that, the plan was made without much of my input. I honestly can't remember much of the conversation after that. All I could think about was the dread of showing her my embarrassing inability to swim. And any thoughts of confessing my feelings were completely overshadowed by that. Still, I couldn't deny there was a part of me that was looking forward to it. I bet she'll look adorable in a swimsuit. Sitting alone in my apartment, I muttered to myself. Even though there was no one around, my face turned bright red. And then, the next week arrived. Okay. Let's start swimming. Seeing her, I couldn't help but feel a little, just a tiny bit, disappointed. Her swimsuit was a black, full-coverage training suit that went from her neck to her knees. She was fully committed to teaching me how to swim. Without warning, she took what I had been holding. Oh! The inflatable ring I had been clutching was snatched away and promptly tossed far into the distance. You'll be fine. Humans float, you know. I wanted to complain, I can't swim because I don't float. But I kept quiet and followed her lead. Taking a deep breath, I cautiously dipped my feet into the river. Wow, it's cold. Right? Feels great, doesn't it? Lately, the heat had been unbearable. Even now, the sun was shining down brightly on us. But as soon as my feet touched the water, I felt the refreshing chill. That area's deeper, so let's start in the shallow part to get used to the water. Reluctantly, I waded deeper into the river. Though it had been scorching hot just moments ago, the water was so cold that it sent shivers through me. Whoa, that's chilly. I shuddered. Yeah. Maybe it's still a bit early for swimming, and look, there's no one else here. Emily voiced what I had been trying not to think about. We were completely alone. Last summer, this place was packed with local kids. It was a Sunday, just at the start of July. Maybe people weren't in the mood for swimming yet. Since no one's here, we can practice as much as we want. Okay, let's start with kicking. Grab my hands. It seemed we were really going to practice swimming. Not considering how holding her hands would make my heart race, Emily smiled at me, completely oblivious. Just as I resigned myself to learning how to swim, I heard a faint cry. I turned around instinctively. What's wrong? Emily's voice was puzzled by my sudden action. I heard a cat meowing. I started to explain, but Emily suddenly shouted. Look! Over there! She pointed downstream, to a spot further along the river. On a rock in the middle of the river stood a small, trembling cat. We have to save it. Without hesitation, Emily was about to swim toward the cat. I barely managed to grab her arm. What are you doing? Let go of me. She tried to shake me off, but I held on tightly. Isn't it deeper over there? It's dangerous. Emily shot me a sharp look. I can swim just fine. If we don't hurry, it'll get swept away. I shook my head vigorously. The current could pick up suddenly. Don't be reckless. Here, this way. I held onto Emily's hand as I walked toward the shore, ignoring her protests. Here. At least use this. I handed her the inflatable ring she had taken from me earlier, then pulled a rope from my bag. You brought a rope? Emily asked, surprised. Well, I can't swim, so I came prepared with everything I might need in case something happens, I said as I tied the rope securely to the inflatable ring. The little cat was still trembling on the rock in the middle of the river. All right, I'm counting on you. As I said that, Emily pressed her lips together in determination and swam out toward the kitten. A few minutes later, Emily, the kitten, and I celebrated our safe return on the riverbank. I let out a deep sigh. Emily, you're way too reckless. At my exasperated tone, Emily looked down slightly. But, she pouted, and I raised my eyebrows in concern. What would you have done if something had happened? When I asked, Emily glanced at me. If something happens, I know you'll take care of it, Kevin. That was unfair. Well, I guess that means I'll have to always stay by your side and watch over you, huh? At my words, Emily's eyes widened and her cheeks flushed. What does that mean? I looked straight at her. When you swam out to save that cat, your back looked so small, and I couldn't stop worrying. What if you didn't come back? That thought crossed my mind. So I decided, if you came back safely, I'd confess. Emily's face was bright red. I was probably just as red. I want to always stay by your side and look after you. Is that okay? Emily smiled warmly. Yes. I might make you shake your head in disbelief over and over, but I'd love for you to stay by my side and watch over me. I nodded with a huge smile. A few years have passed since then. Sorry to keep you waiting. Emily came running toward me, waiting at the school gate. Hey, how was your day? Let me carry that for you, I said, offering my hand. You don't need to. It's fine, she replied, though the tote bag she handed me was much heavier than fine. Wow, lots of books today, I commented as I slung the bag over my shoulder. Emily laughed. Yeah. I'm helping a student who's struggling with a section, so I borrowed a bunch of reference books from a senior teacher. She seemed to be struggling with how to teach the material. Just as I was thinking how kind and dedicated she still is, Emily suddenly broke into a jog. Hey! Don't run, it's dangerous. Ahead of her was an elderly woman. You look like you're carrying something heavy, let me help you. Emily offered. I quickly caught up to them and gently took the bag from Emily before she could grab it. Nope. I've got this. Emily frowned. But I could have carried it just fine. I glanced down at Emily's belly. Don't forget that you're pregnant. This is exactly why I can't take my eyes off you. As I sighed in exasperation, the elderly woman smiled and said, You've got such a kind husband. No, it's Emily who's the kind one. I replied with a wry smile, carrying the bags in both hands as we started walking. When we arrived at the woman's house, she invited us in for tea, but I said, we should get home, Max is probably feeling lonely. Emily smiled and nodded, you're right. We'll come visit again soon. Emily waved with a cheerful smile. Knowing her, we really would visit again. The cat we rescued from the river that day had stuck to Emily ever since, so we named him Max, and he became her beloved pet. Now, here we are. Emily and I got married, and Max is part of our family. In just a few months, we'll be welcoming another new member to the family. Since I'm always worried about Emily and her tendency to take risks, I've made it a habit to pick her up after work. Thank you for always watching over me, Emily says, expressing her gratitude as always. I promised to keep an eye on you, I replied, offering my hand. Emily gently squeezed it. I hope we can keep walking hand in hand like this forever. With that thought in mind, we slowly started walking home, where Max was waiting for us. During a negotiation involving $5 million, my sister Emily was belittled by Tom, the manager of our client company. Tom, with a sneer, told her, "Don't act so high and mighty for a subcontractor," and shockingly poured the coffee he was holding over her head. Cool down with some coffee. A useless subcontractor like you doesn't belong here. Ah. Emily stood there, coffee dripping from her hair and soaking into her clothes from her shoulders to her collar. I hurriedly tried to rush over, but immediately after, Emily sharpened her gaze and stared intently at Tom, then confidently declared, "Get Mr. Hughes right now." Huh? Why would a subcontractor think they can summon Mr. Hughes? Tom laughed smugly, completely unfazed. But the next moment, his face turned pale as he learned a truth he never expected. My name is Kevin Adams. I work for an automotive parts manufacturer, and I'm 45 years old. My job involves handling the development and production of parts while dealing directly with car manufacturers. Sometimes, I even propose new parts for upcoming vehicle models, a job that is both challenging and rewarding. I love the lively, tense atmosphere of the development site, and whenever I can find the time, I like to visit the production site. To be honest, most people at my level would probably stay in the office and just give orders to their subordinates. But as a graduate of an engineering university, I can't help but want to see the action on the ground. Wearing my workwear and heading to the site, I talk with the younger colleagues, checking things out for myself, and hearing their honest feedback. Some people tell me, it's time for you to settle down in the office, but to me, being on site is fundamental. This is a routine I refuse to give up. And today, just like always, I changed into my workwear and went to the production site. I checked the production site while listening to the colleagues to see if they have any issues. Just as I was thinking about heading back to the main office, a young woman's voice called out to me. Hey there! How's it going, Emily? Smiling brightly in front of me was my sister, Emily. She joined the same company as me right after graduating from college. She's 27, still early in her career. I've always been the kind of person who sticks to my opinions and follows through on whatever I set my mind to. Even at this age, my habit of popping into the production site is probably because of that trait. But when it comes to my much younger sister, I can't always be so assertive. That has a lot to do with our upbringing. Our mother passed away shortly after Emily was born due to complications from childbirth. And when Emily was just 4, our father died of an illness, leaving me, at the age of 22, to take care of both of us. At the time, I was a new employee, incredibly busy, but I refused to give up on raising Emily. I'd drop her off at daycare before heading to work, get my overtime hours waived so I could pick her up, and walk home hand in hand. With the support of those around me, I managed to figure out housekeeping, and Emily grew up quickly and healthily. I was also feeling lost after losing our parents, but having Emily with me kept the loneliness at bay. Before I knew it, she had graduated from college. When she told me she wanted to work at the same company as me after seeing how I managed to balance work and raising her, I was so touched I almost cried. After getting the job at the company, Emily steadily devoted herself to her work, and now she's been entrusted with handling several deals. Just recently, she was chosen as the lead for a major transaction, and she talked about it with her eyes shining. I figured she had stopped me just now to talk about that deal. With that thought, I paused and waited for her to speak. Perfect timing. I just met the person in charge of the $500,000 deal for the new product. Her name is Tiffany, and she's a very calm, composed woman, a truly wonderful person. According to Emily, Tiffany came across as incredibly sincere, and Emily had a great impression of her. During their meeting, Emily learned that Tiffany had originally worked in a technical role but had just transferred to the sales department last month. Because of this, she had a wealth of knowledge and shared many detailed insights about products that Emily, still new to the industry, wasn't yet familiar with. Their conversation flowed so well that what was supposed to be a 2-hour meeting ended up running longer. Tiffany apologized, saying, "I talk too much. How about we have lunch together, Emily," and treated her to a meal. Emily also tried to decline, saying, "Even though I was the one asking all the questions, I can't accept being treated to a meal by a business partner." However, Tiffany casually brushed it off, saying that she should let her seniors take care of her. Over lunch, they continued their lively conversation about work and ended up becoming quite close. I understood the conversation well because I've been hearing a lot about the production floor from you, big brother. She really listened attentively to our situation, such a kind person. I hope it turns into a great partnership for both sides. And, by the way, stop calling me big brother at the office. When I pointed it out, Emily smiled and said, "I'm sorry," as she gave a small nod of her head. I couldn't help but think how sweet she is, always apologizing so sincerely without any bad intentions. Maybe I'm just being a doting brother. Regardless, seeing Emily adapt to her job and work so passionately made me genuinely happy. Since then, Emily has told me that the meetings have been going well. The parts for the new product have been completed on schedule, and the new production line has been running smoothly without any issues. It seems the product is selling well on the client's side too, so much so that they've already placed an additional order to increase production. It's really going well, huh? I've even heard people talking about the new product from the client's side. It's amazing. Tiffany said that at this rate, the order volume could multiply in the near future. Her words made my eyes widen in surprise. If the volume were to multiply, we'd be looking at a deal worth millions. I hadn't yet received official word, but I hadn't expected the sales to be this strong. That sounds like something we'll be discussing in an internal meeting soon. Yeah, and when that happens, I'll make sure we secure a continued partnership. I'm going to give it my all. A few days later, I actually received an inquiry from the business partner about increasing the order volume. Let's give it our best, big brother. Yeah, Emily, I'm counting on you for this deal. On the day of Emily's big meeting, after some negotiations, the deal grew to a total of $5 million. I was wondering if the conversation was getting lively by now when I received a phone call. The caller was Mr. Hughes from a business partner, who wanted to discuss something about the product. You'd like to discuss something? Actually, I'm at the factory right now, not at the headquarters. Ah, yes, I believe our office is nearby, right? Would you mind coming over? Our representative is currently in the middle of negotiations with your team. I mentioned that I was in my workwear, but he assured me that wouldn't be an issue. So, I got into my car and headed over to the company to meet with Mr. Hughes. When I arrived, he came out personally to greet me. Thank you for making the trip here today. Not at all, we're grateful for the chance to work on such a great deal. We were guided to the meeting room while chatting pleasantly. Along the way, one of his staff approached Mr. Hughes with something urgent. It seemed to be an urgent matter, as Mr. Hughes made the request with a concerned expression. Would you mind waiting in the meeting room for a bit? I'd also love to introduce you to your sister once the meeting wraps up. Of course, I don't mind. I'll wait in the room, I said, walking down the hallway. That's when I heard Emily's voice from a nearby room. Tom, that's inappropriate. Work and personal matters should be separate. Inappropriate? What's inappropriate about it? I'm just suggesting we grab a bite and talk about work in more detail. I heard the voice of the man called Tom, arguing with Emily, coming from the conference room. Feeling a sense of dread, I rushed inside. Inside the room, I saw Emily, her face red with anger, being confronted by a man in his 50s. That must be Tom. A woman in her early 30s stood nearby, trying to stop him. Tom had grabbed Emily's hand, and despite her protests, he wouldn't let go. Fury surged through me, and I stepped between them. What do you think you're doing? Can't you see my sister doesn't want this? What? You are her brother? Tom faltered for a second but then looked me up and down with contempt. When he saw I was wearing workwear, his face twisted into an openly scornful expression. So, the sister's in sales, and the brother's just a grunt on the factory floor, huh? Don't get so high and mighty for a subcontractor. That has nothing to do with it. Let go of my sister and apologize immediately. When I calmly stated it, Tom glared at me, looking upset. He clicked his tongue in frustration, then slumped into the sofa and took a sip of coffee. But almost immediately, he snapped, "It's cold," and slammed the cup down on the table with a loud thud. Don't lecture me like you're somebody important. I'm older, and I'm the department head for the main contractor. You're just a subcontractor. So get out of this room, outsider. There's no hierarchy like that in work. And I'm no outsider, I was called here by Mr. Hughes. I calmly explained the situation to Tom while shielding Emily, who had finally been freed, behind me. Tom didn't like my composed response. His eyes flared with anger, and he raised his voice. Called by Mr. Hughes? What a blatant lie. Are you that dumb? Wait. My brother is. In a flash, Emily stepped forward. Perhaps it was out of a sense of responsibility, knowing she was the one in charge. Just as she leaned in to explain the situation to Tom, it happened. I'm talking right now. Don't interrupt me. Here, cool off with this, useless subcontractor. Without warning, Tom threw his coffee all over Emily's head. Ah. Ha ha. You've really grown into an adult who looks good with coffee now, haven't you? Almost as fitting as your brother in his workwear. Coffee dripped from Emily's hair, soaking into her clothes from her shoulders to her collar. I rushed to help her, but before I could, Emily's eyes sharpened. She glared at Tom and spoke firmly. Get Mr. Hughes immediately. What? Are you two out of your minds? What makes you think subcontractors can summon Mr. Hughes? Tom, showing no remorse, kept grinning and looking at Emily, who was drenched in coffee. He was toying with her, thinking she was in a weaker position than him. His incredibly disrespectful attitude made me so furious that my eyes turned red. At that moment, the woman who had been standing frozen in shock, the one who had been trying to stop Tom, finally moved. Emily, are you okay? This is too much. Tiffany, thank you. The woman called Tiffany hastily pulled out a handkerchief and began wiping Emily's hair and suit. It seems that this woman is the original account manager, Tiffany. Emily, still trembling with anger, never broke her gaze on Tom. What's with that look? If you've got a problem, I can cancel this deal anytime. Tom sneered, laughing without the slightest hint of regret. Just as I was wondering how to handle this despicable man, Mr. Hughes burst into the conference room with incredible speed. What is going on here? His eyes darted around the room, trying to assess the situation, and when he saw me standing grim-faced and Emily drenched in coffee, he gasped in shock. This is outrageous. I'll take care of this immediately. Yes, Mr. Hughes. I'll call security and have them throw these two out. Don't worry. I just taught this uppity subcontractor girl and her factory worker brother a lesson. Tom, looking triumphant, confidently spoke and flashed a smile at Mr. Hughes, as if expecting praise. However, Mr. Hughes's face had turned pale as he quickly apologized to both me and Emily. Kevin, Emily, I'm deeply sorry for what Tom has done. Yes, he repeatedly harassed my sister, despite her objections, and when I called him out on it, he poured coffee over her head. I pointed to Emily's soaked hair and coffee-stained suit. Mr. Hughes looked at the brown puddles forming on the floor and began trembling, bowing even lower in front of us. I am truly, deeply sorry. Tom, what on earth were you thinking? Huh? Why are you bowing to these subcontractors, Mr. Hughes? They didn't show proper respect to us, so I was just teaching them a lesson. Tom clearly still didn't understand the gravity of the situation. Despite the fact that anyone Mr. Hughes would apologize to like this couldn't possibly be just a subcontractor, Tom remained utterly clueless. I was no longer just angry, I was exhausted by his stupidity. With a cold voice, I addressed both Mr. Hughes and Tom. Mr. Hughes, we've had a long-standing relationship, but I'm going to have to reconsider our partnership moving forward. What? Wait, please. If you pull out now, Kevin, it will devastate us. I'll deal with Tom immediately, I beg you, please reconsider. Mr. Hughes, trembling uncontrollably, stared at me with wide, pleading eyes. But I was done. I can't do business with a company where colleagues not only look down on others but go so far as to pour coffee on them. I cannot trust your company with a $5 million deal. Consider the matter closed. $5 million? What kind of ridiculous lie is that? You should be ashamed of yourself. Who do you think you are? Tom, yanking his arm free from Mr. Hughes's grip, shouted at me, still not grasping the severity of the situation. But it was Tiffany, surprisingly, who stepped in to stop him. Though visibly shaking and pale with fear, she mustered her courage and confronted Tom with a determined expression. Don't you know who this is? This is Kevin Adams, the chairman of Adams Holdings. Adams Holdings? You mean the group with 15 companies across the country? No way, this young guy. Tom finally began to understand, beads of cold sweat forming on his forehead. Tiffany, her expression serious, moved closer to him, continuing to scold him. And Emily is Mr. Adams' sister. What have you done? Not only will you cause a $5 million loss, but you'll ruin all future business with them. No. I just thought they were just some random subcontractors. If I had known they were important people, I wouldn't have. Tom, now drained of any defiance, collapsed onto the sofa, unable to even look me in the eye. The truth was, my father had been the president of a nationwide group of companies. The year I started working as a new employee, my father, the company president, passed away. Since then, I unexpectedly took over as president and have been running the company tirelessly, all while taking care of my younger sister, Emily. At the time, with my father's sudden death, unsavory individuals had tried to move in on the company's leadership. It was only with the help of my father's trusted advisors that I was able to navigate the crisis that could have shaken the entire group. The fact that I was my father's son gave me the credibility to unite the group under my leadership. Of course, it was also thanks to the colleagues who believed in me, despite my inexperience. And the support of the senior management that I managed to hold everything together. Whenever I think back to those times, I feel deeply grateful and humbled by the people who stood by me. Years passed, and once the company stabilized, I handed over the role of president to a capable employee, stepping back to serve as chairman. I believed that for the company to grow in a healthy way, it was essential not to cling to family-run leadership. Thanks to the hard work of the colleagues, Adams Holdings has continued to thrive. As chairman, I oversee the 15 companies in the group, keeping a close eye on their performance. I also make a point to visit the field directly, like today, to stay informed about what's happening on the ground. Emily had previously told Tiffany about her background, that she was the daughter of the former president, and that her brother was the chairman. As Emily had mentioned, Tiffany was not the type of person who changed her attitude based on someone's status or position. In a good way. She never gave Tiffany any special treatment and treated her just like the other colleagues. Emily trusted Tiffany deeply for that. As an employee of our company and my sister, Emily has been humiliated here today. This will be the end of our business relationship. Please, wait. Could we have a chance to apologize? Tom, apologize right now. Mr. Hughes, pale as a sheet, bowed repeatedly as he desperately pleaded with me. But Tom, still not fully accepting the situation, stood there blankly, glancing between Emily and me. No one told me someone important was visiting. If I had known, I wouldn't have acted like that. This is entrapment. I've always conducted business as just an ordinary employee. I wanted to be evaluated on my own merits, without relying on my family's position. That's how I plan to prepare myself for a future leadership role, Emily firmly replied. Emily responded firmly, and though Tom mumbled something in an attempt to argue back, he quickly averted his eyes in embarrassment. Well, maybe I was in the wrong this time, but you deceived me too, didn't you? Tom. How dare you still speak so rudely? I coldly bid farewell to Mr. Hughes, who was furious once again. That aside, I couldn't leave Emily in her coffee-soaked state any longer. I'll be taking my leave for today. If I don't, my sister might fall ill. Please wait. We can have fresh clothes brought for her immediately. Just please don't cancel the contract. Mr. Hughes's panic was understandable. Though my company was a subcontractor supplying products, our advanced technology and broad product range made us one of the top firms in the industry. If we pulled out, he'd have no choice but to find another supplier. However, matching the quality and price we provided would be nearly impossible for his company. The cost of production would skyrocket, and some products might not even be replicable. Our work was crucial, not only for this specific deal but for the overall quality and pricing of his company's products. And if Adams Holdings as a group ceased all business with him, it would mean the collapse of everything his company had built. In essence, he would be blacklisted from the entire industry. No wonder he was desperate. Tom, who had been slow to grasp the situation, finally began to understand as he saw Hughes's frantic demeanor. He started bowing repeatedly, but it was too little, too late. I ignored him as I led Emily out of the building, without a second thought. From behind, I could still hear Tom's desperate pleas and Hughes's furious reprimands echoing in the hallway. As I stepped out onto the main street to hail a taxi, I heard light footsteps running after me. It was Tiffany, her face flushed from running so hard. Mr. Adams, Emily, I'm so sorry for what happened. Tiffany, out of breath, bowed deeply to both Emily and me. Tom is my superior, and whenever he deals with women or subcontractors, he acts this way. I was the one in charge of the deal. But somehow he found out the representative was a young woman and forced his way in today. According to Tiffany, Tom's behavior had been a long-standing issue within their company. He would bully subordinates, women, and subcontractors, throwing his weight around to get what he wanted. Yet, when dealing with higher-ups, he was all smiles and charm, which is why the company had never taken any action against him. I actually gathered the courage to confront Tom once. I told him that main contractors and subcontractors should work together as partners, but, shockingly, instead of reflecting on his behavior, Tom had retaliated by spreading false rumors about Tiffany to the HR department, which resulted in her being forcibly transferred from the development department to sales. As his direct subordinate, she had been treated even worse since. After seeing what happened to me, everyone was too scared to stand up to him. But meeting and talking with Emily gave me the strength to face forward again. It turned out Tom's plan had been to push Tiffany out entirely and take over the deal himself. He thought he could interact with Emily, a young woman, and then claim all the credit for the work. But Tiffany hadn't given up and tried her best to stop him, even in the conference room today. But in the end, I wasn't much help and had to rely on Mr. Adams. No, you were a great help. If you hadn't stepped in and held things up, I wouldn't have been there in time to protect Emily. I truly appreciate what you did. I softened my expression slightly. Sure, looking at the result, Emily had been humiliated, drenched in coffee, and insulted. But Tiffany had bravely stood up to someone who had mistreated her in the past, not for herself, but for Emily. That was courage. When I thanked her, she blushed deeply and waved her hands bashfully. From now on, I want to be braver and help create a company where everyone can work comfortably. I won't give up on making this place the ideal workplace after what I've seen today. The ideal company? While it might sound nice to call her kind, Tiffany's demeanor had always given off a somewhat timid impression. However, the Tiffany speaking in front of me now had eyes sparkling with excitement and a face full of hope. When I asked her my question, Tiffany hesitated a little before speaking. A company where people in weaker positions can work comfortably. A place where no one is dismissed just because they're a woman or a subcontractor. I want to create a company that values people for their skills. I see. Well, maybe I can help with that in some way. I shared an idea I'd been thinking of with her. As I spoke, her face brightened, and she nodded enthusiastically, a smile blooming across her face. The next morning, both Mr. Hughes and Tom arrived at my company early. Standing in front of me, they bowed so low it seemed their backs might break. We deeply apologize for the trouble we caused during such an important business deal, Kevin. No amount of apology can make up for the trouble we've caused you. Mr. Hughes was about the same age as my late father. Seeing Mr. Hughes, a man as old as my late father, bowing repeatedly because of his subordinate's misconduct made me feel a bit sorry for him. However, Tom, the cause of all this, though now appearing serious, still had a look in his eyes that betrayed his frustration and unwillingness to truly accept responsibility. In front of me, as I stared coldly, Mr. Hughes bowed even lower and prompted Tom. I've brought him here to offer a formal apology. I'm deeply sorry for my actions, Tom said, bowing deeply. He may still be a department head. But even so, Tom's bow is polite, and his choice of words is proper, yet it doesn't feel like a genuine apology. Whether he's unaware of the hostile look in Tom's eyes or simply ignoring it, Mr. Hughes appealed to me once again. Tom is reflecting deeply on his actions. Please, reconsider your decision about the contract. If it's you, Mr. Hughes, asking so earnestly, I won't say no outright. However, there are conditions. Mr. Hughes's face brightened for a moment at my words. However, once he realized there were conditions, he bit his lip as if steeling himself. I understand. I will take full responsibility and retire. That's not necessary. In fact, I would like to continue our partnership. The issue I want addressed is with Tom. At the mention of his name, Tom visibly flinched, casting a wary glance in my direction, unsure of what was coming. As Tom cautiously wondered what I was going to say, I firmly made my declaration. Tom has harassed people he deems beneath him, subcontractors and female colleagues. I want the company to hold him accountable for that. What is this nonsense? That's an unfounded accusation. He probably couldn't stay silent after hearing what I had to say. Tom, his face turning bright red, began to argue back. I dismissed him easily, continuing to lay out my conditions to Mr. Hughes. It's not nonsense. I witnessed his actions firsthand in the meeting room. Moreover, I want a commitment from your company to create a workplace where women can thrive. Do you really think our company is that difficult for women to work in? Mr. Hughes muttered quietly. He likely doesn't know what's really happening on the ground. And that wasn't surprising. Until now, no matter how much Tiffany and the other colleagues tried to speak up, Tom had crushed any unfavorable opinions using every trick in the book. But Tom, clearly desperate to avoid accountability, lashed out again, spitting his words angrily. These are baseless accusations. Tiffany's just exaggerating things and spreading rumors. No, it's not just Tiffany making these claims. I pulled out a thick stack of papers and handed them over. Tom's eyes widened in shock as he stared at the hefty file. It was a collection of complaints from colleagues reporting Tom's misconduct. In front of a stunned Tom, I explained the contents one by one. You've been overloading your subordinates with unreasonable amounts of work and punishing them with menial tasks like cleaning when they couldn't complete everything. You've also made inappropriate advances toward female colleagues and retaliated against them when they rejected you, getting them reassigned. Where did you get that report? Stop it. Stop reading it. Tom's previous rage evaporated into sheer panic as he lunged to grab the documents from my hand. Before he could, though, Mr. Hughes firmly grabbed his arm and yanked him back. That's enough. We can verify these claims easily, Tom. It's all lies. These are just fabrications from people who can't do their jobs and want to smear me. They just want to get back at me. Tom stammered, pale and desperate to deflect blame. But I wasn't done. I pulled out the final, irrefutable piece of evidence. No, these reports have been confirmed as true. We've cross-referenced the dates with security camera footage from inside your company. Your actions and words have been captured on tape. I showed him another set of documents. There was already a printout with the report number, the corresponding dates and times, and images extracted from the security camera footage. As for the company whistleblowers, it turns out that Tiffany had been quietly gathering evidence for some time. Many within the company had been troubled by Tom's actions, and people eager to assist Tiffany began coming forward one after another. The number of reports has now exceeded 50. I can't help but wonder just how many times Tom has acted so tyrannically over the years. Thinking about the long-term suffering of the colleagues sends a chill down my spine. Tom flipped through the thick stack of reports silently for a while, but it became clear he realized there was no way to talk his way out of this. Finally, he collapsed to his knees and began sobbing uncontrollably. Shortly after, Tom was fired from the company in a disciplinary dismissal. It was reported that multiple colleagues had filed individual lawsuits against him, and there were even several cases under police investigation. Since the day Mr. Hughes learned the truth about Tom, he had been deeply remorseful, to the point of looking gaunt. He deeply regretted not being able to take any action before it escalated into such a major incident. I'd betrayed the trust of my colleagues. As a president, I feel utterly ashamed. From now on, I will ensure that nothing like this ever happens again by focusing on improving our company's compliance. As promised, just 2 months later, a compliance department was established within the company. Tiffany was appointed as its first head. Every day is busy, but we've finally taken the first step toward creating the ideal company. I'm going to build a workplace where everyone can thrive. From her smile, all I can feel is kindness. There's no trace left of the timid side she once had. As I looked at her radiant smile, I noticed a playful glint in her eyes. I've changed this much thanks to both Emily and you, Mr. Adams. I'm looking forward to continuing to work together. Seeing her smile, I felt optimistic about the future of her company. As your partner, we'll have to keep up, too. Thinking about the bright future ahead, I couldn't help but smile. And so, I continue with my duties as chairman. That said, I still make frequent visits to the factories because I believe staying connected to the field is essential. Desk work alone dulls my senses. As for Emily, she has continued to build her own track record and recently earned a promotion to section manager. She has become a confident and capable employee, able to handle any negotiation with poise and respect. Emily's really flourishing. I have high hopes for her abilities. Thank you. But now it's your turn to step up, big brother. Emily is probably pushing me forward because of my relationship with Tiffany. Since the incident, Tiffany and I have grown much closer. We are now dating with the intention of marriage. I know that, as chairman and as a person, there will always be critical decisions to make. But no matter the situation, I want to face them with courage and make the necessary choices. With that thought in mind, I headed toward the place where Tiffany was waiting for me, the words of my proposal already formed in my heart. Whoa! No way! Is this? I'm struggling right now. Right in front of me is my boss, her skirt flipped up, showing off her seductive legs without a hint of modesty. I swallowed involuntarily. Just as my hand, fully guided by reason, reached out to pull her skirt back down, my boss, who should have been asleep, suddenly opened her eyes. "Don't touch me! You pervert!" She slapped my hand away as she bolted upright, and the words social annihilation flashed in my mind. My life is over. As I thought that, my boss, exuding an aura of sensuality, tried once again to break my self-control with, "Aren't I amazing? I'm Richard, 29 years old. I work for a travel-related company. Hey, Mike. What happened with that project from the other day? I'm in the sales planning department." As soon as a cold, emotionless woman's voice echoed through the office, a wave of tension swept over us. The voice belonged to Kimberly. She has sleek, long black hair and pale skin, combined with her sharp, almond-shaped eyes, not the trendy large double-eyelid ones. She is the epitome of traditional Japanese beauty and the kind of woman who catches everyone's attention, admired by countless employees, both men and women. However, nobody in this company dares to approach her casually, because she's known as the Snow Queen. Mike, now called out by Kimberly, nervously began his report at her desk. Yes. So first, I contacted the local city hall's PR office, and I discussed our plan with them. Skip the details. Just tell me the results. The moment Kimberly cut him off, the entire department fell silent, as if the air had dropped to freezing temperatures. Her expression didn't change, and her voice showed no hint of emotion. When she looked at you with those piercing eyes, it felt like your body froze. Mike, under pressure, stumbled through his words before handing over the summary report and contracts. By the time he returned to his seat, he collapsed onto his desk, like ice melting after being broken. Poor guy. Efficiency is everything. Results over process. A classic old-school worker. Kimberly is the epitome of the workaholic who demands efficiency and loathes anything wasteful. She's strict and cold. That's why we call her the Snow Queen. She's cold to everyone, but she's even colder to me. It's not just cold, it's like she's indifferent. She never asks me about my personal life, and when it comes to work, she only checks on the bare minimum progress. She's never really scolded me either. She probably doesn't expect anything from me at all. It's been 7 years since I joined this company. I'm not particularly good at sales planning, but I don't cause any major problems either. In short, I'm just average. There's nothing to gain from standing out in life anyway. So why would someone like Kimberly, the Snow Queen, take any interest in me, let alone choose me to assist her with her work? Or so I thought. "Richard, I need you to accompany me on a business trip next Friday. A trip to a regional hot spring area." She personally requested me to assist her. Me? Yes. The meeting with the client is scheduled for the evening, so it'll be an overnight stay. Surprisingly, she seemed considerate of my weekend plans, noting that the Saturday might be impacted by the overnight stay. Turns out, she's not as old-fashioned as I thought. Yes. No problem at all. As I responded, I could hear the other employees behind me quietly murmuring, "Why Richard?" I could hear them quietly grumbling, "It didn't have to be him." It was unusual for Kimberly to assign an assistant for business meetings. Yet, she had chosen me, someone rather unremarkable. Their complaints and doubts were completely understandable. For this meeting, we'll be aligning our proposal with the client's requests. The key is being able to support the negotiations smoothly without getting in the way. I need someone who can quickly adapt to the client's needs and adjust our proposal on the spot. I judged Richard to be the right person for that. Do you need any more reasons? Kimberly's words, sharp as ever, shut down any further grumbling. Even I, the person she was praising, was left speechless, not expecting such an evaluation from her. I'll send you the details by the beginning of next week. With that, Kimberly ended the conversation and turned her attention back to the documents in front of her. I bowed, holding back a heavy sigh as I returned to my seat. The next Friday, Kimberly and I took the afternoon bullet train to our business trip destination. There was still some time before the train's departure. I took care of some errands first and decided to grab a snack, letting Kimberly know before I stepped out of the waiting room. Kimberly's favorite coffee is this one, right? As I returned with drinks for both of us, I noticed an elderly woman with a cane looking around anxiously. I checked my watch. There were about 20 minutes left before the train departed. Having been raised by my grandmother, I couldn't just ignore someone in trouble, so I approached her. Is something wrong? The woman, still looking around, turned her worried gaze to me. I think I lost my wallet. A lost wallet is a serious issue. Do you remember where you last used it? I bought my bullet train ticket and went straight through the gate. She realized it was missing when she tried to buy a drink inside the station. I looked around, but there was no wallet in sight. Let's go check at the ticket counter where you bought your ticket. Oh, I couldn't ask you to go out of your way for me. It's no trouble, we still have some time. I couldn't leave this elderly woman with her cane and large duffel bag to manage on her own. I took her bag and escorted her to the ticket counter. Luckily, her wallet had been turned in. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so sorry to have troubled you. Please let me do something to thank you. The relief on her face was palpable as she repeatedly bowed in gratitude. It's really no big deal. There's no need to thank me. But when I checked my watch again, I blurted out, "Oh no." There were only 5 minutes left until the train's departure. The woman was still trying to thank me, but I quickly said, "Please don't worry about it. I've got to go," and rushed off. When I reached the platform, the train doors were already open, and I jumped on just in time. Trying to catch my breath, I made my way to my seat, realizing that a full sprint is tough for someone in their late 20s. It was hard to get my breathing back to normal. Richard, where did you go? I was calling you so many times, I thought you wouldn't make it. Still panting as I sat down, I immediately got a scolding from Kimberly. Her voice had an unusual hint of emotion, making it clear that she had been worried about my absence. Sorry. Oh, here's your coffee. I was strangely pleased that I had managed to stir even a little emotion in her, and I couldn't help but chuckle through my still labored breathing. Trying to cover it up, I handed her the coffee I had just bought. Well, you made it, so I guess it's fine. But please be more careful next time. She stared at the coffee for a moment, then in a slightly uncertain tone, gave me another warning. When I replied with "I'll be careful," I heard a soft, almost muttered thanks for the coffee. An hour from the city center, we arrived at a coastal hot spring town. In front of the bustling station, filled with tourists, Kimberly and I stood out in our business suits. Since we were returning the next morning, I only brought a backpack with my work essentials. In contrast, Kimberly was pulling along a rolling suitcase. I figured she had more luggage because she's a woman, but the suitcase seemed quite large for just a one-night stay. This is my hometown, and I'm going to visit my family tomorrow. It seemed Kimberly noticed my curious glance at her suitcase, so she explained. I was surprised to learn that this coastal town was where she grew up. It felt unexpected. I wanted to ask more, but I doubted she'd be open to talking about her personal life. Suppressing my curiosity, I looked around. The area in front of the station was bustling with tourists, lined with souvenir shops, many selling dried seafood and other local specialties. The mouth-watering smells of grilled fish from the storefronts filled the air, teasing my appetite. Amidst the tempting smells, the scent of the sea mixed in, and I muttered to myself, "Smells like the ocean. If you go down the hill, you'll reach the ocean." The wind must be carrying the scent up here today. I caught a glimpse of Kimberly's profile, and it looked like she was smiling gently, but she quickly reminded me that we were short on time. And we headed straight to the meeting. The meeting lasted about 2.5 hours. In addition to being a popular tourist destination, the area was actively engaged in promotional activities. The client was very enthusiastic about our proposal for regional revitalization, and the meeting successfully resulted in a formal contract. Afterward, the client kindly hosted a dinner, where we enjoyed local seafood freshly caught at the nearby port and regional craft beer. Perfect for the tourist atmosphere. I never thought I'd end up working with Kim. The person speaking to Kimberly in such a casual tone was the client's manager, who had joined us for the dinner. He seemed to be a local and appeared to know Kimberly from before. "Are you going to drop by Ben's place?" "I'm thinking about it for tomorrow." "I see, everyone's been worried since you haven't been showing up to the union meetings. They're wondering if something's wrong." The conversation seemed personal, and I noticed a slight shift in Kimberly's expression, as if her mood had darkened. Feeling like an outsider in their conversation, I chose to focus on chatting with the other attendees, letting them have their private discussion. After the dinner, Kimberly and I headed to the business hotel where we had a reservation. "I am terribly sorry," the hotel receptionist said, bowing deeply. "Are there no more rooms available?" "We have one twin room left, but we cannot provide two separate rooms." We also checked with nearby accommodations, but they are fully booked as well. The room we had reserved wasn't actually available. It might have been a double booking between the company's reservation system and another site. With the increase in inbound tourism and the recent staffing shortages in hotels, this issue had become more common. It was past 9 p.m. on Friday in a popular tourist area, and there were no other rooms or accommodations available. Sharing a room with someone of the opposite sex at our age. And with Kimberly, of all people, there was no way that could be okay. "Then, we'll take that one room for two people, please." Despite my nervousness, it was Kimberly who calmly booked the room. "Excuse me, but there's still time to catch a train. I can head back to Tokyo. As your superior, I can't let you travel that distance at this hour. Plus, we still have a little work to finish. Staying in the same room will be more efficient. After all, it's just for sleeping. Do you have any issues with that?" Of course, there's an issue. My internal scream didn't seem to reach Kimberly, who was already checking us in. It seemed her mind was already made up. "This is work, this is work." I kept repeating it to myself, trying to steel my resolve. "I'm struggling right now." In front of me lies Kimberly, stretched out on the bed. Still dressed in her suit, her tight skirt has ridden up, revealing her long, slender legs without hesitation. How did it come to this? I held my head in my hands. For the first hour, we had been summarizing the details of the meeting. Once we finished, when I opened the fridge to grab a can of beer I had bought earlier, she said, "I think I'll have one too." Kimberly was the one who suggested it herself. She doesn't usually attend company drinking events. She only shows up to the necessary farewell or year-end parties, and I'd always seen her drinking only soft drinks. I had assumed she either couldn't drink or disliked alcohol, but apparently, I was wrong. As an apology for the hotel's mistake that led to us sharing a room, they offered us free drinks from the minibar. The sound of the local beer's tab popping open echoed with a satisfying click. "Thanks for today. The meeting went smoothly thanks to you, Richard. Well done. Cheers." With a slight smile, Kimberly raised her beer toward me and took a big gulp. Her unexpected words of appreciation made me smile naturally as well. "Cheers, and thank you for everything," I said, raising my own can and taking a drink. Kimberly quickly finished her beer and, looking pleased, reached for a canned cocktail next. Seeing her smiling and drinking happily, far from the usual composed Snow Queen demeanor she's known for at work, would have shocked everyone at the office. "Richard, you should really be better at promoting your accomplishments." Kimberly spoke unusually cheerfully, but her words were starting to slur slightly. She probably wasn't very strong with alcohol. It was already a rare experience to talk with her one-on-one like this. But seeing her cheerful and tipsy was an unexpected perk of this business trip. I'd been drinking at a decent pace too, and when I checked the time, I saw it was already past midnight. When we started discussing calling it a night, she offered me the shower first, saying, "You go ahead." Still holding her canned cocktail. She seemed in no rush to sleep. Feeling a bit drowsy, I gratefully accepted and headed to the shower. And that's how we ended up here, me in a mental struggle. I couldn't take my eyes off Kimberly's seductive legs as she lay passed out drunk. And I could see it. That piece of fabric under her skirt. The drowsiness that had clouded half my brain instantly vanished, replaced entirely by a flood of desire. Gulp. I could hear the sound of my own throat swallowing loudly. My hand, moving slowly, hesitated for a moment. The urge to pull her clothes further up, to indulge in the sight of her legs. Slap. I smacked my own left cheek. What the hell am I thinking? Get a grip. Using every ounce of self-control, I reached out to pull her skirt down, covering her exposed legs. At that moment, Kimberly, who I thought was fast asleep, suddenly opened her eyes and locked gazes with me as my hand was still on her skirt. Oh, crap. I froze as cold sweat broke out all over my body, despite having just taken a shower. What are you doing? You pervert. I couldn't move my hand from her skirt, and what I heard next was, of course, a voice full of justified outrage. No, no. It's not what it looks like. I swear. Panicking, I struggled to find the right words, unable to explain myself properly, and could only keep repeating, "It's not what it looks like." What do you mean, it's not what it looks like? You lifted my skirt, and you were looking at my underwear, weren't you? I didn't lift it. Okay, maybe I saw a little, but it wasn't on purpose. You fell asleep while I was in the shower. And your skirt rode up because of how you were lying. I was just trying to cover you up because it was exposed. As Kimberly raised her voice, I became even more flustered, too frantic to choose my words carefully. You were looking, weren't you? No, I wasn't. I swear, it wasn't intentional. I didn't want to look. I don't make moves on drunk people, especially not my boss. Desperately trying to explain myself, I suddenly realized that Kimberly's expression had turned hurt from my words. I see. Someone like me, you'd never make a move on someone like me. Wait, no, that's not what I meant. An uptight, boring, and unappealing snow queen like me. I was stunned to realize that Kimberly knew about that nickname, and I was at a loss for words. Taking my silence as confirmation, she sank deeper into her own thoughts, muttering, "I knew it, someone like me." As she spiraled into self-pity. Come on, this is ridiculous. Does she really not know how attractive she is? A cheerful drunk is fine, but this teary, self-pitying version was a nightmare. No, you've got it all wrong. I swear I didn't try anything. But do you honestly think I felt nothing seeing you like that? Right now. I'm barely holding back from jumping on you. Kimberly, who had been slumped over and clutching the blanket, suddenly looked up, as if jolted by my words. You want to jump on me? Of course I do. You're an incredible woman. So much so that I want to undress you right now. What am I even saying to my boss? I ran my hand through my hair in frustration as the weight of my reckless words began to sink in. This is definitely sexual harassment. More like beyond it. I cautiously glanced at Kimberly to see her face turning bright red, her mouth opening and closing without any sound. But I won't lay a hand on you. I wouldn't reduce you to something like that. My feelings for you aren't like that. She was speechless. Her eyes widened, and her face flushed even more deeply at my words. Wait, did I just confess? Maybe I'm the one who's drunk. I didn't mean it like that. I started, but then I heard a soft, "I'm happy." Ha! I looked at Kimberly, and with her eyes shimmering and her face still red, she smiled beautifully at me. Please be my boyfriend. The next morning. So, feel free to call me Kimberly or Kim. Just something more casual. As if she wasn't the same person who had bared her heart last night, Kimberly, now in full work mode, was explaining today's schedule to me. Kimberly's confession from last night. In reality, it was a request for me to pretend to be her boyfriend. Today, she needed me to help out at her family's restaurant, near the coast, as her boyfriend for the day. Every time I visit, my family keeps asking about my relationship status and marriage, and it's been stressing me out. I haven't come home in years because of it. I figured if I brought a boyfriend along, it'd take the pressure off. With Kimberly bowing deeply and apologizing for the trouble, I couldn't bring myself to refuse, and now here I am, standing in front of her family's diner. For the record, nothing more happened last night. After her shower, Kimberly went straight to bed. Thanks to that, I barely got any sleep. Can you fillet a horse mackerel? Barely after exchanging greetings, I was hit with a question, to which I could only respond with a confused, huh? If you can't even make mackerel sashimi, I won't acknowledge you. You'd be useless in this shop. Dad, why are you assuming I'm going to take over the shop? I've told you 100 times, I'm not taking over the shop. Richard works at the same company as I do. There's no way we're staying in this small-town shop. Kimberly's father, Benjamin, looked like the typical stubborn diner owner. His sharp eyes were very much like hers. Then why did you bring him here? To show off some city guy? I don't care about that. We're opening for lunch soon. Just get out of here. It was clear that Kimberly's father didn't approve of me, and he continued gutting fish while coldly dismissing me. Benjamin, I may not be able to fillet fish, but I can help with orders or anything else you need. Please let me assist you. Even if it was just for a day, I wanted to play the role of her boyfriend properly. I don't need you calling me Benjamin either. I couldn't help but stammer, sorry. It felt like something out of an old-fashioned drama. Dad, why do you have to be like this? You've been pestering me about marriage and grandkids for ages, so I brought him here. Besides, you've been complaining about your back pain. Shouldn't you take a break? I'm not sick. Don't make me sound like an invalid. Kimberly, who normally never shows her emotions, was now speaking so emotionally in front of her parents. I found myself thinking that, after all, she turns into a daughter when she's around them. I'm sorry you had to see that. Those two are always like this when they see each other. They're just too similar, said her mother, Samantha, as she gently placed a glass of Calpico in front of me, not seeming troubled at all. She was clearly used to their family quarrels. Oh, but really, we don't need any help. The shop has been so quiet lately. Even on the weekends, when we should be busiest, it's completely dead. As Samantha spoke with a worried expression, Benjamin's voice suddenly cut in, don't say unnecessary things. Huh? Why all of a sudden? Just as Kimberly, who seemed to be hearing about the shop situation for the first time, was about to ask for more details, the sliding door of the shop swung open. Hello. A man, probably in his mid-40s, walked in wearing sunglasses that shone unnaturally. The shop's not open yet. Get out. Benjamin said coldly as soon as he saw him. I was just stopping by to say hello to the neighbors since I'm in the area. I thought this place had already gone under, but I guess it hasn't yet. This shabby, poorly reviewed restaurant is still hanging on, huh? The man, who was striding into the shop with a rude attitude, made me furrow my brow. And who might you be? If you're not a customer, please leave. Kimberly said with a sharp look, clearly annoyed, and urged him to leave. Oh, what a pretty young lady. If you're not a customer, then you must be the daughter, right? I'm Daniel, from the shop across the street. Daniel, the owner of a seafood restaurant that had opened about 2 months ago, leered at Kimberly from head to toe, a sleazy grin on his face. He apparently runs several restaurants in major cities and popular tourist destinations. This coastal hot spring town had once been a thriving tourist destination, but over time, it had declined. Abandoned hotels lined the hills, and most of the shops in the shopping district were shuttered. In recent years, however, thanks to a younger generation taking over and newcomers from the city, the town had started regaining its vibrancy and re-emerged as a tourist hotspot. With that resurgence came people like Daniel, looking to profit from the renewed popularity of the area. "Didn't you hear me? I said get out," Benjamin repeated in a low voice, and Daniel, now holding up his smartphone, sneered, "I'd better post this terrible customer service on social media, so no one comes to this awful shop." "Hey!" Kimberly raised her voice, but I quickly stepped in front of her, directing my own phone at Daniel. "If you post anything online, we'll take legal action. You don't have permission to film here. Now, get out of our shop. If you refuse, I'll call the police. You know, what you're doing falls under defamation, intimidation, and trespassing, right?" "Just kidding. Come on, let's get along as neighbors. Look, see? I didn't record anything. But who knows how long a poorly reviewed shop like this will last? Anyway, I'll be going now." Clearly shaken by my words, Daniel grimaced, clicked his tongue, and finally left the shop. I let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, only to find Kimberly staring at me in amazement. "Richard, that was impressive. It's just some stuff I picked up online. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but I figured a restaurant owner wouldn't want to cause any trouble. It was a bit of a gamble since he seemed like a sketchy guy." Still, Kimberly and her mother, Samantha, praised me enthusiastically, making me feel a bit embarrassed. But Benjamin, on the other hand, looked displeased. "When did this become your shop, huh?" He seemed upset by the fact that I had referred to it as our shop during the confrontation. It was just an instinctive response in the heat of the moment. "Dear." He stood up for us, and that's how you thank him? Exactly. He protected the shop. Before I could even apologize, Samantha and Kimberly were already scolding Benjamin. Faced with the pressure from the two women, Benjamin swallowed his words and ended up with a sheepish expression on his face. "Gore. You. Have you eaten lunch yet? Stay and eat." As Benjamin grumbled and disappeared into the kitchen, Samantha smiled and said, "That's his way of showing gratitude." "Sorry about that." As I bowed toward his back, saying, "Thank you," I suddenly heard him groan in pain. Benjamin let out a groan of pain as he collapsed to his knees, clutching his body in discomfort. "Benjamin!" We rushed over to him, and his face was twisted in pain, sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm calling an ambulance." Without hesitation, I quickly dialed for help. The diagnosis from the local hospital where Benjamin was taken was kidney stones. Although immediate first aid was provided, the doctor explained that there was also a stone large enough to require surgery, and he would need to stay in the hospital for about a week. He has never had kidney stones before. He hasn't been sleeping well recently either. Maybe it's from stress. But I'm just so relieved it's not life-threatening, Samantha said, breathing a sigh of relief. I felt the same sense of relief, and a soft "that's good" escaped my lips. "Thank you for being here with me," Kimberly said, looking up at me with a grateful but slightly sad expression. Leaving Samantha at the hospital to stay with Benjamin, Kimberly and I returned to the diner to prepare for the temporary closure of the shop. "Thank you for helping with all of this, Richard." "I'm sorry to burden you," Kimberly said quietly as she started tidying up. "I've been worried about my father's health since my mom mentioned he wasn't doing well recently. I've always been defiant whenever they brought up marriage, but I also felt a need to show my face and reassure them. That's why I asked you for such a big favor. I'm sorry for dragging you into this." You don't need to apologize. I replied softly, matching her tone. I really didn't feel like she was a burden at all. This place is a tourist spot, but it's still a small town, you know? Everyone knows each other, and rumors spread fast. Like, if someone from the Smith family went out last night, it'd be all over town by morning. It's such a typical small-town vibe, and I hated it. I wanted to leave and make a name for myself in Tokyo, not stay in this little diner. It was a huge deal for my parents to send me to university in Tokyo, running a small diner and all. Now that I'm older, I finally realize how hard that must have been for them. It's taken me this long to want to be a good daughter, now that my dad's not in great health. I feel so selfish. But you've worked hard and been successful in Tokyo. You've achieved your dreams, and that's also a way of being a good daughter, I said, trying to reassure her. Kimberly smiled, though with a hint of sadness, and replied, I'm just a token at the company. You know how the government is pushing for more women in leadership roles? My company is just trying to boost their numbers. In reality, the men still dominate the discussions, and hardly any of my proposals are accepted. I'm just checking off management tasks that higher-ups want me to do. She lowered her head slightly, hiding her frustration. That's not true. I really respect your work. You're always so precise and give clear, rational instructions. That's why you were given your role. Not just as a token, I said earnestly. Thank you. You're the only one who's ever said that to me directly, Richard. Kimberly looked surprised by my words, but after a moment, she gave me a shy smile and said that. Since yesterday, I've been seeing expressions on her face that I've never seen before. If you don't mind me asking, do you really not have anyone you're dating or thinking of marrying? I still think it would be nice to introduce someone real to your parents someday. From the way Benjamin told me to stay for lunch, as if trying to hide his embarrassment, I got the feeling that if Kimberly chose someone, he'd probably grumble but ultimately accept them. He's likely just waiting for the day he gets to meet the person his daughter will marry. No, that's why I asked you. To be honest, I don't really have the desire to get married. I just don't see the point in it. Maybe I'm just not cut out for it, with my personality. I've always struggled with relationships. But lately, just a little bit. I've started to think that someone who stands up for me, like you did, might actually be nice. Her cool eyes met mine, but there was a hint of warmth in them now. And I don't usually like being in the spotlight or standing up for people either. But recently, I found myself wanting to protect someone, without thinking twice about it. I could feel the warmth in my face reflecting in her eyes. As the distance between our faces grew just a little closer, the evening chime of the clock echoed in the shop, and we instinctively broke the gaze we had been holding. When I looked away, my eyes landed on the calendar hanging in the kitchen, and in that moment, I made a decision and spoke up. Would you let me help with turning the shop around? Kimberly looked surprised, her face still a little red. But I don't want to trouble you with anything more, she said hesitantly. I want to help. Please let me. Gripping her hand as I pleaded, my seriousness seemed to take her by surprise, and she nodded with wide eyes. 3 months have passed since then. Welcome. I'm now helping out in Benjamin's diner, chopping cabbage, cooking rice, and doing whatever else I can. I can only come on my days off, of course, and although Benjamin initially said, we don't need help from an amateur, after seeing me come nearly every week, he finally gave in. Benjamin's health has been great since he got out of the hospital. Hey! Don't let the soup boil over. Yes, sir. Sorry. Watching us from the dining area, the local regulars, already used to this sight, sat back, drinking beer as if it were just another afternoon. Man, since Kim's boyfriend started coming around, the place has been full of life again. You've been posting lots of promotions on that. What's it called? Social. social media. And not just that, there were a ton of nasty reviews online about the shop. Like people saying it smelled like rotten fish or the service was awful. But Kim and Rick took care of all that. The internet these days is incredible. Samantha added, clearly relieved by the recent upswing in business. I had been puzzled by something Daniel had said about poor reviews, so I decided to look into the shop's online reputation. Sure enough, the diner had an unbelievably low rating of 1 star, with comments like, "It smelled like rotten fish," and "The staff were terrible." But Benjamin and Samantha didn't recognize any of these complaints. What was even stranger was that during Benjamin's hospital stay, 2 more negative reviews were posted, even though the shop was closed. Now I was sure of it. The dates when the negative reviews started appearing coincided with the opening of the shop across the street. It was almost certainly their doing. I had heard of similar cases from clients before. They recruit people through crowdsourcing to post negative reviews about rival stores. These reviewers are paid for leaving bad comments, pretending as if they had visited the shop. People who have never even been to the store write reviews as if they were actual customers. It was despicable. I responded to the malicious reviews, questioning the reviewers about the date of their visit and what they had ordered. At the same time, I used the shop's social media account to post a warning that we might pursue legal action against those posting false reviews. What happened next? The negative reviews started disappearing, and soon the overall rating went back up to 4 stars. Supportive comments from actual customers who had visited the shop began to appear on social media. When I showed this to Benjamin, he muttered a curt "I see," but the slight upward curl of his lips betrayed his satisfaction. "Richard, you're really something, aren't you? You've been hiding your skills at work, haven't you?" Kimberly said with a sideways glance. The truth is, I never struggled with studying or learning new things. I picked up skills quickly, no matter the subject. That's why I was never really motivated. It was the same at work. I would laugh along with others, going through the motions day by day. I watched passionate people with cold, indifferent eyes. But after meeting Kimberly and the people here, I found myself wanting to change, to protect them. For the first time in my life, I felt that living was actually enjoyable. I wanted to be useful to others. And for that, I would use my abilities to their fullest. Just then, a customer walked in. The sound of the sliding door opening was followed by Samantha's cheerful greeting, "Welcome." Then, with a more formal tone, she added, "Jessica. It's been a while." It really has. "I've been traveling for work, but I finally got back here the day before yesterday," Jessica replied. Their friendly conversation filled the air, and when I glanced out from the kitchen, I saw a familiar older woman standing there. "Oh, you're the young man I met at Tokyo Station." Her eyes met mine, and she immediately recognized me, calling out with a happy smile, "Ah, you're the one from then." I blinked, and then it clicked. It was the woman whose wallet I had helped find at the station 3 months ago. "I've been looking for you. I heard there was someone from Tokyo helping out here, so I thought I'd stop by." "I'm so glad I found you," she said, smiling warmly. I couldn't believe she had come all the way here based on that rumor. "You know Jess?" The local regulars seemed surprised to learn that I knew this Jessica woman, so I explained that I had simply helped her out at Tokyo Station. "Do Benjamin and Samantha know Jessica as well? Know them?" "Jessica here is." One of the regulars began to explain, but before he could finish, the shop's door slid open again. "Hello there." It was Daniel who had entered. He had the same smug grin on his face as the last time he showed up at the shop. "What do you want?" We all knew he wasn't here as a customer. Kimberly shot him a suspicious look as she asked, "Oh, I just figured this place might be on the verge of shutting down, so I thought I'd check if it'd make a good spot for one of our new tenants. But wow, looks like you've got quite a crowd in here. How strange." "Folks, let me tell you, this shop serves spoiled food. and they overcharge customers they don't like. You should really avoid this place. Daniel suddenly started yelling, trying to scare the customers. How dare you say that? We've never done such things. Kimberly shouted back, flustered, trying to defend the shop. You've got no proof that I'm lying, do you? There are reviews from customers saying just that. And it looks like this place is threatening people to get those reviews deleted, isn't it? Daniel sneered. I stepped forward to face him. You seem awfully invested in checking out this shop's reviews. Even going through the details? Well, it would be bad for business if the place across the street scared off my customers, so of course, as a business owner, I keep tabs on that. Daniel shot back with a smirk, his brow furrowing briefly. These days, it seems there are plenty of people with low online literacy, willing to write fake reviews just to earn a bit of pocket money. It's easy to manipulate public opinion when you're paying for it, isn't it? My words hit right on target. Daniel visibly faltered, showing clear signs of agitation. What are you implying? That I did something like that? Where's your proof? He shouted, clearly rattled. Before I could respond, an unexpected voice rang out. Leave. Now. It was Jessica. Her voice was calm, but there was an undeniable strength behind it, a stark contrast to the kind demeanor she had shown earlier. What's your deal, old lady? This doesn't concern you. Stay out of it. Daniel spat. At that moment, the entire room fell silent, and the tension grew thick. Even the local regulars and Benjamin glared daggers at Daniel. You idiot, one of the regulars growled. This woman's the biggest landowner in the area. Nearly all the land around here, including the building your shop is in, belongs to her. Do you even know who you're messing with? Daniel's face drained of color as he realized the gravity of the situation. This is perfect timing. I came here today to inform you that you'll need to vacate our building. What? Why? I've paid the rent on time. Check your contract. Anyone opening a business here is required to join the local Merchants Association and contribute to revitalizing the shopping district. Not only have you refused to join the association, but you've also tried to sabotage this long-standing business. For that, you're being evicted. Jessica stated calmly. That's a breach of contract. Silence. I will not tolerate anyone who disrupts this land. Jessica's fierce voice echoed through the shop. The local regulars standing beside her glared at Daniel with murderous intent. At this point, Daniel had no chance. In a rural town, you can't afford to disregard the influence of landowners and their connections. While the culture here may sometimes feel oppressive, those very connections are what protect and sustain this place. Daniel's business was as good as over in this town. And if you try anything else against this shop, I will personally sue your company. I've already gathered evidence that your business paid people to write fake reviews. As if to deliver the final blow, I spoke in a low voice, and Daniel, his face turning pale, bolted out of the store. I'm so sorry for the commotion. The food here is absolutely delicious, so please, everyone, take your time and enjoy. Oh my, that was scary. Jessica's playful words, full of wit and charm, instantly brightened the tense atmosphere in the shop. A group of young tourist girls even started clapping, exclaiming, "Grandma, you're so cool." Was that enough of a thank you? Her sudden words made me blink in surprise. For helping me with my wallet. I never got to properly thank you, did I? This woman didn't flaunt her status or wealth unnecessarily. What a remarkable person. Thank you so much. I bowed deeply to Jessica, and following my lead, Kimberly and the others also bowed to her in gratitude. The following Sunday night, Kimberly and I were on the bullet train back to the city center. Richard, I can't thank you enough for everything. Really, I'm so grateful in ways words can't express. It's nothing. I was just doing what I wanted to do. Don't worry about it. It's always like this. As soon as we get on the train back, we revert to being just boss and subordinate. The problem with Daniel's shop seems to be settled now. So, you don't need to keep going out of your way. I'll take over managing the social media from here. As for my parents, I'll just tell them the truth. That we never actually dated. And that it was all just an act. Kimberly spoke quietly, looking out the window. Was this her way of saying the fake relationship was over? Benjamin, he knew. He figured out that you and I were lying. Kimberly, with a surprised expression, met my gaze through the train window. Last night, after the shop had closed and Benjamin was having his usual late-night drink with leftovers as snacks, he called me over. Hey, why don't you join me for a drink? It was the first time Benjamin had invited me to drink with him, and I felt a mix of surprise and happiness. Over the past few months, and especially after the incident with Daniel, I could sense that Benjamin had come to acknowledge me. But at the same time, the guilt of the lie weighed heavier on me. I love this place. Even though I've only been helping out for a few months, I've grown fond of Benjamin, Samantha, and the people of this town who welcomed me. That's why I was torn, wondering if I should confess the truth. Can I keep helping here? The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted it. I had no right to reveal the truth without talking to Kimberly first. Benjamin, pouring himself a beer, looked at me intently. No, sorry, just talking to myself. I quickly backtracked. If you want to come whenever you like. The folks around here are big on community. But they've welcomed people who've moved here because they love the place. They appreciate especially the younger ones who can bring life back to the town. But we can do without people like him, though. Benjamin continued as he poured beer into my glass. The people in the shopping district like you. It's not just our shop, you've done things to help the whole area thrive. When you're not around on weekends, the younger guys in the district are disappointed. Thanks to you, we're busier than ever. And we could use all the help we can get. Whether you're with my daughter or not, it doesn't matter. I felt a warmth in my chest, hearing how Benjamin and the locals had accepted me, but I was stunned by his final words. Benjamin, you knew? Kimberly has always loved the mackerel sashimi I make. When she was little, she used to say, I won't marry anyone who can't fillet mackerel like my dad. You couldn't fillet a fish when you first came here. And you still need some practice. She's my precious only daughter. I can tell when she's lying right away. Benjamin's voice, as he lifts the corner of his mouth, is gentle. I remembered the calendar I saw in the kitchen the first time I visited the shop, where Benjamin had written Kimberly. Homecoming in clumsy handwriting. She's not very honest. Stubborn as a mule. But she's kind, kinder than anyone. Richard, do you love her? Benjamin, the awkward father who probably buys the best mackerel for his daughter's visit, asks me this question. Back on the train, Kimberly's face was flushed red, her eyes misty. Dad shouldn't have. Sorry, Richard. That must have been an awkward question to answer. Kimberly wants to know how I answered Benjamin's question, but she can't bring herself to ask. She looked away from me, embarrassed. I love you. What? I told Benjamin that I love you. Kimberly, will you be with me, for real this time, and start a relationship with marriage in mind? Last night, after I gave him my answer, Benjamin had simply nodded, saying, I see, with a satisfied look on his face. Now, I wanted to make Kimberly happy. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she finally turned to face me. Yes, I'd love to. On the train back to Tokyo, we quietly held hands. A year later, Benjamin's shop and the rest of the shopping district were thriving more than ever. Ideas that I and the younger folks came up with were coming to life, thanks to Jessica's support. Even though I still work in Tokyo during the week, I've been approaching my job with a more positive mindset. Kimberly, understanding my desire to work behind the scenes, created a team within the planning and sales department that focuses on support roles, which has made a big difference. It wasn't just for me. Her efforts have improved the workflow of the whole department, earning her a lot of praise. I just want everyone, including Rick, to be able to use their strengths. Kimberly, speaking with that adorable smile she shows only to me, is still someone I deeply respect as a boss. Even though we can't visit every weekend, I know that Kimberly now looks forward to going back to her family's diner with me. At our company, the option to work fully remotely has grown significantly over the past few years. In fact, there are even people who have moved from the city to other places. How about we start living together soon? As Kimberly poured coffee in my kitchen, I asked her with the same casual tone I might use to suggest going out for dinner. I'm fine with living together, but which apartment will we move into? Mine's just a little bigger, I think. She responded so calmly, without a hint of surprise, as if moving in together was a given. I couldn't help but smile. What if we moved to the seaside town we both love? What? She stopped pouring and looked up at me, her face surprised. Are you serious? Yeah. If you'll say yes. Kimberly rushed over from the kitchen and threw herself into my arms. Thank you, I love you so much, Rick. Her voice was slightly shaky with emotion, and I held her close. I love you too. As we gazed at each other, suddenly both our stomachs growled at the same time. Hey! What should we have for dinner? Kimberly laughed shyly, and I couldn't help but smile along with her. It was the beginning of summer. The season when the fish are at their best had come around again. How about we make mackerel sashimi? Because she's the person I'll spend every day of my life with. I'll share my love with her at just the right moments. A life that begins and ends with love. That's the kind of life I want to build with her, in that special place.